The taxi drove away, leaving me standing alone in front of the house I had memorized for 7 years. I recognized the cream-colored walls, the narrow balcony, even the mango tree near the fence. I had seen them in pictures too many times to be wrong. Yet the gate was locked. I walked closer, my hands trembling as I touched the cold metal, expecting familiarity to comfort me. Instead, silence pressed against my chest. I knocked. No answer. When I knocked again, a man I had never seen before appeared inside the compound and stared at me with suspicion. "I'm looking for my daughter," I said carefully, as if my words could break. He frowned. "Madam, you must be mistaken." Before I could respond, an elderly woman nearby slowed her steps and studied my face. "Which child are you looking for?" she asked. I said my daughter's name, holding on to it like a lifeline. The woman's eyes softened, then filled with confusion. "No child with that name has lived here for years." Years. The word echoed in my ears, drowning out the sounds of the street. 7 years overseas. 7 years of sacrifice. 7 years of sending money, trusting pictures, believing stories. My legs gave way, and I sat on the ground, gripping my bag as a single question tore through my mind. If my daughter was not here, where had all those years gone?
Before we continue, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who has trusted this channel with their real-life stories. Your experiences don't just entertain. They teach, warn, and help others feel less alone. If you're watching and you have a life experience you think someone can learn from, feel free to share it with us. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And if these stories move you in any way, please support the channel by liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. It truly helps these voices reach more people.
7 years earlier, my life was already balancing on fragile ground. My husband, Daniel, had died quietly after months of illness that drained both his strength and our savings. One night he complained of tiredness, and by morning, I was a widow with a young child and no clear future. The house felt empty, not because he was gone alone, but because hope had left with him. Bills arrived faster than comfort. School fees, rent, food, each one felt heavier than the last. No one to help. I sold my jewelry first, then furniture, until there was nothing left to let go of except pride. It was my Uncle Joseph who came to sit with me one evening, his voice calm and convincing. He spoke about opportunities overseas, about women working in Saudi Arabia, in a city called Riyadh, earning enough to rebuild their lives. "You will suffer here," he said gently. "But there, you can save your child." I told him I was afraid to leave my daughter behind. He placed his hand over mine and said, "Fear will keep you trapped. Trust me." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. And slowly, desperation convinced me that distance was the price of survival, without realizing that trust would cost me far more than money. The agent my uncle introduced me to spoke softly, as if calm words could erase fear. She showed me printed pictures of neat homes and smiling women dressed modestly, standing beside families who looked kind enough. She explained the work clearly, long hours, discipline, patience, but she spoke most about the pay. "Many mothers have changed their lives this way," she said. I listened with half my heart. The other half was already breaking at the thought of leaving my child. That night, I sat alone and did the calculations repeatedly. Even if I found work locally, it would never be enough. Not for school. Not for rent. Not for the future I wanted for my daughter. Every option I considered led back to the same conclusion. I cried quietly while my daughter slept beside me, her small hand resting on my arm. I wondered how something so small could give me so much strength and so much fear at the same time. The next morning, my uncle returned with the documents. He assured me he would raise her like his own. He promised honesty. He promised protection. I signed. Not because I was brave, but because staying felt like watching my child sink slowly, and leaving felt like a desperate attempt to save her, even if it meant breaking my own heart first. Riyadh welcomed me with heat that pressed against my skin like a warning. Everything felt unfamiliar, the language, the streets, the rules. I held on to my small bag tightly, reminding myself why I was there. The family I worked for was strict but orderly. Days began before sunrise and ended only when my body could no longer argue with exhaustion. I cleaned, cooked, and followed instructions carefully, afraid of making mistakes I could not afford. Loneliness settled in quietly at night. I missed my daughter most then. I missed the sound of her breathing beside me. The way she asked endless questions. The way she needed me without knowing how fragile I was. When my first salary arrived, I stared at the numbers for a long time. It was more money than I had ever held at once. I sent almost all of it home immediately, keeping only what I needed to survive. 2 days later, my uncle sent me a picture. My daughter stood in a school uniform, smiling shyly. She looked healthy. She looked safe. I cried until my pillow was wet, not from pain, but relief. In that moment, every doubt went quiet. I told myself the sacrifice was working. I told myself the distance had meaning. I didn't know then that this relief was the beginning of a carefully built illusion, one that would grow stronger with every picture, every message, and every year I stayed away. Time moved differently in Riyadh. Days were long and demanding, but years passed without warning. I measured my life in salaries sent home and brief phone calls squeezed between exhaustion and duty. Every month, my uncle confirmed that my daughter was doing well. He spoke confidently about her grades, her friends, her growth. Soon, pictures followed of school events, birthdays, simple moments that felt ordinary enough to be real. I saved every image on my phone, studying her face for reassurance. Still, something subtle began to change. My daughter no longer talked freely during calls. Her answers became short, careful, as if she was searching for the right words. Whenever I tried to ask personal questions, my uncle would gently interrupt, explaining that she was shy or tired. I told myself it was normal. Children grow. Distance creates silence. Mothers imagine problems when they are far away. At night, I replayed her voice messages repeatedly, listening for warmth, for familiarity. Sometimes it was there. Sometimes it wasn't. I blamed the poor connection, the time difference, my own anxiety. After all, who questions the man who raised you when your parents were gone? I buried my doubts beneath work and responsibility, convincing myself that trust was necessary for survival. I didn't realize that silence, when ignored for too long, slowly becomes its own form of truth, one that waits patiently to reveal itself. By the 3rd year, my uncle began sending documents. He told me he had used part of the money to buy land in my daughter's name. He explained the process carefully, attaching scanned papers stamped and signed. Everything looked official. Everything looked secure. I felt something close to pride for the first time since I left home. I imagined my daughter growing up with stability, owning something that could not be taken from her. I imagined my late husband smiling somewhere, reassured that his child was protected. Each document strengthened my belief that the sacrifice was worth it. Each message reduced the space where doubt tried to live. I shared the news with friends overseas, speaking of plans and futures, pretending confidence had replaced exhaustion. Occasionally, I asked for pictures of the land. My uncle sent them unfinished buildings, open spaces, progress captured from different angles. He always explained delays, costs, and patience. I accepted everything because I wanted to believe. In quiet moments, a question sometimes surfaced, why I had never seen the land in person, why everything passed through one voice, one phone. But trust felt safer than suspicion. And suspicion felt dangerous when all I had was distance. So I held on to the papers, the pictures, and the hope they represented, unaware that the strongest lies are the ones carefully supported by evidence. By the 4th year, my daughter's face had changed in ways I could not explain. It wasn't only that she had grown taller or slimmer. Something in her eyes felt distant, guarded, as though she was standing behind an invisible wall. During calls, she spoke less. When she did, her words sounded careful, almost rehearsed. The warmth that once flowed naturally between us struggled to find space across the line. I asked about her dreams, her friends, the things that used to excite her. She answered politely, briefly. Whenever silence stretched too long, my uncle would step in, laughing lightly, filling the gaps with explanations. She is at that age, he would say. Children change. I nodded, even when my chest tightened. At night, I scrolled through old pictures of her as a child, messy hair, wide smile, eyes full of trust. I tried to match that girl to the voice I now heard. Distance, I told myself, does this. Time changes people. Mothers exaggerate when they miss their children. Still, I began requesting to speak to her alone. The responses were always reasonable. She was studying. She was sleeping. She was outside. Reasonable answers are the hardest to challenge, because they leave no clear place to stand. I chose patience over confrontation, believing love required endurance. I didn't know then that patience, stretched too far, can quietly become neglect without anyone intending it. One evening, exhaustion kept me awake. The house was silent, and for reasons I couldn't explain, I felt compelled to call my daughter directly. Not through my uncle. Just her. The phone rang. Once. Twice. Again. Then it stopped. I tried again, my heart beating faster with each unanswered ring. No response. The screen went dark, as though the call had never existed. Minutes later, my uncle called me back. She stepped out, he said casually. You know how children are. His voice was steady, unbothered. Too steady. I thanked him and ended the call, but sleep refused to come. I stared at the ceiling, replaying the moment the call ended. The silence afterward felt deliberate, heavier than before. Over the following days, I tried again. Sometimes the phone rang. Sometimes it didn't. My uncle always returned my calls quickly, always with explanations that made sense on the surface. Still, something inside me shifted. It wasn't panic yet. It was awareness. The kind that arrives quietly and settles deep, refusing to leave. I started listening more carefully, reading messages twice, paying attention to pauses I had ignored before. When I told my uncle I planned to come home soon, there was a pause on the line, long enough for my stomach to tighten. Well, okay, he said finally. That was the moment fear fully found its voice. Once the decision to return home settled in my mind, everything around me felt unreal. I moved through my duties in Riyadh as if I were already halfway gone, my thoughts fixed on the image of my daughter waiting for me. I imagined her running toward me, taller now, but still mine. I packed slowly, folding clothes with shaking hands. Each item carried memories of years spent surviving rather than living. I informed my employer and completed the required formalities, repeating to myself that this separation had an ending. When I called my uncle to confirm my arrival date, his voice sounded different, controlled, measured, as if he was choosing each word carefully. You'll find things have changed and I will suggest you work more years before coming, he said. Changed how? And why will he suggest I should stay for more years? Is 7 years not enough? I wanted to ask, but didn't. Fear often disguises itself as patience. During the flight, I stared out of the window for hours, replaying every conversation from the past 7 years. Moments I had brushed aside now returned with weight. Delayed responses. Controlled conversations. Explanations that required no proof. I told myself I was overthinking. At the airport, familiar smells mixed with unfamiliar emotions. Home no longer felt like safety, it felt like a question waiting to be answered. As the taxi drove me toward the house I believed belonged to my daughter, my heart pounded with a strange mixture of hope and dread. I didn't know yet that hope was about to collide violently with reality, without sound, without warning. The taxi stopped in front of the house I had seen countless times on my phone screen. For a brief moment, relief washed over me. The pictures hadn't lied, I thought. This place existed. But relief faded the moment I stepped out. The gate was locked. Not carelessly closed, but secured, as if to keep someone out permanently. I rang the bell once. Then again. No answer. I leaned closer, peering through the bars, trying to spot something familiar. Instead, I saw furniture that wasn't mine, plants I had never seen, and curtains that felt wrong. When a man finally appeared inside, his expression was one of confusion, not recognition. "I'm looking for my daughter," I said, forcing steadiness into my voice. "This is her house." He shook his head slowly. "Madam, I think you are mistaken." Before I could respond, an elderly woman passing by stopped and watched us. Her eyes moved from my face to the house and back again. "Which child are you searching for?" she asked gently. I said my daughter's name, expecting understanding. Instead, she frowned. "No child with that name has lived here for years." The word struck me harder this time. Years. My chest tightened, my vision blurred, and suddenly every picture, every document, every assurance I had trusted began to crumble. The house stood in front of me, solid and real, while everything I believed about it dissolved. And in that moment, I understood something terrible. I had returned home to a place where my daughter no longer existed. I did not cry immediately. Shock has a way of holding tears hostage. I picked up my bags and walked away from the house slowly, afraid that if I moved too fast, my legs would give up on me completely. I went straight to the nearest neighbor I recognized from old pictures. She studied my face for a long moment, then sighed deeply, as if she had been waiting for this day. "You are Joseph's niece," she said quietly. I nodded. Her eyes dropped. "That land was sold a long time ago." The words felt unreal, like they belonged to someone else's story. I asked her to repeat herself, hoping I had misunderstood. "Your uncle sold it," she continued. "He said you agreed." Agreed. My phone felt heavy in my hand as I scrolled through messages, pictures, documents, all the proof I had relied on for years. Each one suddenly felt fragile, like paper soaked in water. I asked about my daughter. The woman hesitated, then shook her head. "She hasn't lived here for years." The street seemed to tilt. Sounds faded. Faces blurred. I thanked her politely and walked away, my mind racing ahead of my body. Somewhere between the neighbor's gate and the road, the truth became impossible to avoid. Nothing I had been sent was solid. And if the land was gone, then my daughter could be gone too. The next few days blurred together. I moved through the city like someone chasing a shadow, visiting places that once felt familiar but now seemed distant and indifferent. I went to the school shown in the pictures my uncle had sent. The building was real. The uniforms matched. For a moment, hope flickered. Inside the office, I mentioned my daughter's name. The administrator searched carefully, flipping through records, typing slowly. Then she shook her head. "No record," she said. I tried another school. Then another. Each answer was the same. At churches, I asked quietly, respectfully, hoping someone would recognize the name, the face, the story. People listened kindly but shook their heads with practiced sympathy. At night, I lay awake replaying my daughter's voice messages, listening for clues I had missed. They sounded different now, too careful, too distant, as if she had been taught what to say. The realization settled slowly, painfully. My uncle had not only controlled information. He had controlled access. I wanted to confront him immediately, but fear stopped me. Not fear of him, but fear of what he might say, fear that the truth could be worse than silence. Somewhere in that fear, a question kept rising. If my daughter wasn't where she was supposed to be, where had she been sent? I was about to give up for the day when a woman selling vegetables near the road studied my face too closely. I noticed her eyes linger, as if she was comparing my present to a memory she wasn't sure she trusted. "You look like Joseph's niece," she said cautiously. Those words stopped me. I nodded, afraid of what might come next. She lowered her voice. "You're looking for the girl, aren't you?" My heart skipped. I asked her how she knew. "People talked," she said. Not loudly. Just enough. She told me my daughter had lived nearby years ago, quiet and obedient, always accompanied by someone. Then one day, she was gone. "Joseph said she was sent away," the woman added. "He said it was for her own good." Sent away. The phrase followed me long after I thanked her and walked away. It sounded harmless, even reasonable, but it explained nothing. Away where? With whom? For how long? That night, I sat alone in the room I had rented, staring at the wall. Every sacrifice I made replayed itself like a warning I had ignored. I realized something painful then: my uncle hadn't needed force to control my life. He only needed my trust. And if my daughter had been sent away for her own good, then someone else had decided what good meant for her, without me. I called my uncle the next morning. He answered immediately, his voice warm, familiar, unchanged. For a moment, I almost doubted everything again. "I'm home," I said. There was a brief silence. Then he sighed. "You should have told me first." I asked him about the house. He said it was complicated. I asked about the land. He said markets change. Each answer slid smoothly into the next, practiced and calm. Then I asked the question that had been burning inside me. "Where is my daughter?" Another pause. Longer this time. "She's fine," he said. "You worry too much." I pressed him. My voice trembled despite my effort to remain calm. Finally, he spoke more firmly. "Amara, you were not here. I did what I thought was best." Best. The word landed heavily between us. I asked him why the schools had no records. He said paperwork gets lost. I asked why I could never speak to her alone. He said children change. Every explanation felt carefully measured, designed not to convince, but to end the conversation. When the call ended, my hands were shaking. For the first time, I stopped hoping he was innocent. I began accepting that betrayal doesn't always look cruel. Sometimes, it looks reasonable. After the call, I didn't sleep. Instead, I began retracing every step, every message, every picture my uncle had sent over the years. I realized that all of it, photos, videos, even documents, was filtered through him. Nothing had come directly from my daughter. Nothing had been untouched. I visited the schools again, showing them old pictures. Teachers shook their heads politely. No one remembered a child like mine. Every name, every record I had trusted was gone or fabricated. Churches, clinics, old neighbors, they all offered the same silence, as if the city itself was keeping secrets. The absence of answers hit me harder than any lie could. And yet, somewhere in that silence, I found a clue. A whisper from someone who remembered seeing her, not as the child in the pictures, but older, changed, distant, living under a different name. The realization hit me like a physical blow. She was alive, but someone else had decided her life, her experiences, and the person she would become. I felt fury bubble up, but it was tempered by fear. Not fear of my daughter, but fear of the unknown. If Joseph had orchestrated this, how far did his control extend? How many people had he involved? I vowed then that I would trace every thread. Every lie. Every half-truth. And I would find her, no matter how long it took. Days of searching led to a breakthrough, a name whispered in confidence by a woman who claimed to remember my daughter living nearby years ago. The name was different, unfamiliar, but the memory behind it was unmistakable, the way she laughed, the way she avoided strangers, the habit of tucking hair behind her ear in nervous moments. I wrote down the address with hands that shook. My heart pounded with hope and dread in equal measure. She was alive. Somehow, she had survived the absence I had feared would destroy her. I stood outside the small, faded house, my pulse racing. I rehearsed what I would say, how I would approach her, how I would convince her that I was her mother. My thoughts collided violently. What if she didn't recognize me? What if she rejected me, or worse, didn't want me? I told myself to be patient. But patience was an unfamiliar companion after years of distance, lies, and deception. Every instinct screamed to rush forward, to demand answers, to reclaim the life stolen from both of us. And then the door opened. For a brief moment, everything slowed. She was there. Alive. Standing on the threshold of the house that was supposed to be hers. And yet, her eyes did not recognize me. I stood frozen as she blinked up at me, her eyes wide, uncertain. She did not move forward. She did not call me mother. She simply stared. The words I had rehearsed for years lodged in my throat. I swallowed hard and finally whispered the only thing I could, "It's me. Amara. I'm your mother." For a moment, silence hung heavy between us, thicker than any wall. Then she spoke, her voice quiet, cautious. I don't know you." I felt my heart twist painfully. Every call, every video, every promise I had clung to felt meaningless. I wanted to cry, to scream, to shake her until she remembered. But I realized that force could not undo 7 years of absence. I knelt slowly, lowering myself to her level. "I left because I had to survive," I said, trying to steady my voice. "Everything I did for you." She looked at me, searching, skeptical. "Why did you leave me?" I closed my eyes, fighting the flood of guilt. "I thought I was protecting you. I thought I could give you a better life." Her silence answered me more sharply than words could. I realized then that finding her was only the first step. The real journey, rebuilding trust, was about to begin. I turned to face my Uncle Joseph, the man whose calm assurances had been a cage for both my daughter and me. His expression was carefully neutral, the kind that masked any guilt he might feel. "Why?" I demanded, my voice low but firm. "Why did you take her from me?" He sighed, leaning back in his chair, as if answering a question he had been asked 1,000 times. "I did what I thought was best," he said. Best. The word made my stomach twist. Best for whom? Certainly not for me. Certainly not for my daughter. "You lied." Every picture, every document, every call, I held up the phone, trembling. It was all fabricated. His eyes flickered briefly, a crack in the mask. "I protected her. You were far away. I thought I was helping." I shook my head, disbelief mingling with rage. "Helping? You took her life and molded it for yourself, Joseph. You decided what she would see, what she would know, and what she would never have with me." For the first time, I felt clarity slicing through years of confusion. He had controlled my life by controlling trust. And I realized, the next move was mine. I would take back my daughter. I would reclaim every stolen year, no matter the cost. After confronting Joseph, I felt a strange combination of exhaustion and determination. For years, I had been a passive player in his carefully orchestrated story, but now I realized that the only way forward was to gather every fragment of truth. I returned to the streets, revisiting neighbors, old teachers, and anyone who might remember her. Every piece of information I collected became a thread in the tapestry of deception he had woven. Her new name, the people she had lived with, the schools she had been sent to, all of it slowly came together. Each discovery carried a bitter weight. My uncle's manipulations were vast, but they were not infinite. Somewhere in this city, my daughter had lived her life shaped by someone else's decisions. I sat in the small cafe near her last known address, sipping bitter coffee, replaying every memory I had of her, the soft laugh, the way she held my finger as a toddler, the night I promised I would protect her no matter what. I realized I had waited too long to act, but I also understood that patience was not weakness. It was preparation. The truth had begun to reveal itself, and with it, the first glimmer of hope. I would find her. I would reconnect. And when I did, nothing would ever be the same. Days of searching finally led me to the small house where she had been living. I stood across the street, studying the faded paint and the small garden she had once tended. My heart hammered, not with joy, but with a mixture of fear and anticipation. I rehearsed my words, but the closer I stepped, the more I realized that rehearsed words would not matter. Time had passed. Distance had built walls. All I could do now was face her. I knocked. The door opened slowly, revealing a young woman who resembled my daughter, yet was not quite the child I remembered. Her eyes widened in surprise and caution. I'm looking for Amara, I said softly, catching myself. I'm Amara. I'm your mother. Her expression froze, a flicker of confusion and disbelief crossing her face. For a long moment, she said nothing. I wanted to explain, to beg, to make her remember, but I forced myself to wait. Then she stepped back slightly, holding the door between us like a fragile shield. Recognition did not come immediately. But the door had opened. And that, I realized, was the first victory. The first few hours with her were painfully quiet. I couldn't force recognition or affection, I could only exist beside her, letting her see me without demanding anything. Every laugh, every glance, every pause carried the weight of 7 years lost. I brought out small tokens from her childhood, drawings, tiny shoes, the blanket she once refused to sleep without. She looked at each object as though trying to place it in a memory that wasn't hers anymore. I spoke gently, telling stories only a mother would know, the night she said her first word, the day her first tooth fell out, the way she would hide behind my skirt when strangers came near. Her eyes softened slightly at some stories, but remained guarded. Trust wasn't automatic. It couldn't be. It had been stolen and replaced by absence, by lies. I realized that patience would be my only weapon. I couldn't make her love me, but I could show her consistency. I could show her presence. I could reclaim my place slowly, day by day, moment by moment. And as I left that night, I promised myself silently. Every day forward, I would fight for her recognition, her trust, and her life, the one that had been shaped without me. Joseph reached out the next morning, his voice casual, as if nothing had changed. But I felt a storm inside me. The man who had stolen years of my daughter's life could not be allowed to dictate the next steps. I will not let you interfere, I said firmly, my voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath. Your time controlling her is over. He hesitated, the pause speaking volumes. Amara, I only wanted to protect. I trusted you, I interrupted sharply. You betrayed that trust. You decided for me and for her. That ends today. For the first time, I realized the power I had regained, clarity, focus, and the undeniable bond that only a mother can hold. He could try to justify his actions, but he could not erase the truth, nor could he stop me from reclaiming my daughter. I spent the day reinforcing routines, small interactions that rebuilt connection. She responded cautiously but willingly, sensing perhaps that I was no longer a visitor, no longer tentative. I was her mother, fully present, fully aware, and fully determined. I realized that boundaries were not just walls, they were a declaration of self-worth, a shield against manipulation, and a framework for rebuilding the life Joseph had tried to control. And for the first time in years, I felt the taste of freedom, not for me alone, but for both of us. Days passed, each one slower and heavier than the last, yet every interaction with my daughter carried a small spark of hope. Healing wasn't instant, it was a fragile process, a careful weaving of trust and familiarity. I listened more than I spoke, letting her guide the pace of our conversations. We shared meals, walked slowly through familiar streets, and revisited memories together, the old mango tree, the corner shop, the school playground. I told her stories of the father she barely remembered, of small moments of joy we had shared before the distance tore us apart. Some nights, I would sit alone, replaying the past 7 years, feeling grief wash over me in waves. Every sacrifice, every lie, every phone call sent through my uncle now felt like scars, reminders of the battle we had survived. And yet, with each smile, each tentative hug, I felt fragments of trust return. It was fragile, but it was real. For the first time since leaving Riyadh, I allowed myself to hope again. Not blind hope, but a deliberate, cautious hope, the kind that grows from effort and presence rather than promises. I realized that survival had brought me here, but healing would keep us together. By this point, the shadows of the past had begun to lift. My daughter still carried the weight of absence, but she also began to show the resilience I remembered in her earliest years. She laughed more freely, asked questions, and even challenged me sometimes, the way children do with mothers they trust. I had become more than a visitor in her life. I was present, consistent, unyielding in my devotion, and careful in my patience. Joseph's influence, once invisible but ever-present, had weakened with every step we took toward normalcy. I realized that reclaiming my life, and hers, did not mean erasing the past. It meant asserting the reality of the present, the love that had endured, and the truth that could no longer be silenced. One evening, we sat together under the mango tree, talking about dreams, memories, and the years we had lost. She leaned against me, and for the first time, I felt her fully here, not as someone shaped by deception, but as my daughter, alive, aware, and present. The stolen years could never be returned, but the life we had now was ours. And in that moment, I understood something powerful. Survival had saved us, but love, and patience, was what would truly restore us. 7 years had tried to break me, to scatter my life into fragments I could never recover. But as I sat under the mango tree with my daughter leaning against me, I realized something profound: we had survived. Not by chance, not by luck, but because we refused to be defined by the lies and manipulation of one man. The stolen years could not be returned, but the bond we rebuilt was stronger than anything that had tried to separate us. Every tear, every sleepless night, every desperate phone call had led to this moment, her recognizing me not just as the mother she once knew, but as the woman who had fought to reclaim her. I looked at Joseph one last time, distant and powerless, knowing he could no longer influence our lives. His control had ended, not with anger, but with clarity. We had reclaimed what he thought he could own: truth, presence, and love. For the first time in years, I exhaled fully. My daughter laughed, a sound that carried the past and future together in one fleeting, perfect note. We had lost time, but we had gained life. And sometimes, I realized, survival itself is the loudest, most beautiful victory of all. That's my story. And thank you for watching. May we all find light in our darkest moment? Please like and subscribe.